Nearly every chapter in history has an unsung hero, and the saga of the Pilgrims is no exception. One man was largely responsible for their ideas on life, faith, self-government, liberty of conscience, and an openness toward those whose beliefs differed from their own.
His name was John Robinson. He was the Pilgrims' pastor. And if you haven't heard of him, it's probably because he didn't board the Mayflower and sail for New England. Yet John Robinson's life is a testament to the impact one person can have across the oceans and across the centuries.
He was born in 1575 in the town of Sturton-le-Steeple, 160 miles north of London. The village was named for its church spire, which still stands. In 1592, Robinson entered Corpus Christi College at Cambridge University, earning his Bachelor of Arts degree 3 years later. Corpus Christi would become his second home for more than a dozen years. It was a hotbed of Puritan thought.
Reverend William Perkins, one of the leading lights of the Puritan movement, deeply influenced John Robinson while he was at Corpus Christi. Perkins believed in a kinder, gentler sort of Calvinism. Through the legacy of Perkins' public lectures, sermons, and massive body of writings, Robinson's ministry emphasized a loving, just, and reasonable God who sacrificed all for those he had saved.
Robinson embraced Puritanism's goal of reforming the English church. But a new king, James I, had just taken the throne and was anxious to flush out the reformers and enforce religious conformity.
In February 1604, John Robinson left Corpus Christi, married, and brought his new wife Bridget here to Norwich because he had been called to serve as the associate pastor of St. Andrew's Church. Norwich was an industrial center with strong business ties to Flanders and Holland, and many of the city's foreign workers were religious refugees. John Robinson's ministry here, in partnership with Pastor Thomas Newhouse, another minister influenced by William Perkins, proved to be so popular the church had to add additional seating. But their success together would not last long. In July 1604, a royal proclamation required that all ministers conform to a new book of church regulations called the Book of Canons. They had until November to conform, or episcopal authorities would suspend them and prohibit them the practice of their ministry. John Robinson would neither conform nor leave his pulpit. He continued preaching until he was suppressed, and his supporters were promptly excommunicated. With his suspension, Robinson could find no further employment in Norwich, and he had a growing family to feed. Historians presume that John and Bridget Robinson came home here to the village of Sturton-le-Steeple. Robinson's rejection of conformity was not a rejection of the Church of England. He spent the next 2 years in deep conversation with reform-minded ministers like Richard Clifton and John Smith. And at the end of those conversations, he was a separatist.
In search of a new family of believers, Robinson found them here, at All Saints Church in the village of Babworth. Its pastor was his separatist mentor, Richard Clifton, who Sunday by Sunday was remaking the Anglican worship service into something very new and different.
Within these walls, John Robinson was witnessing something revolutionary in the history of Protestantism. For 1,500 years, the Catholic Church had been worshiping in the same traditional way and ornate way. And for many English Reformed Christians, they felt the Church of England had followed that example. Richard Clifton was inventing a new order of worship, a simpler way, modeled on the practices of the ancient Christian churches.
Clifton's innovations are evident to this day in many Protestant services, from the lengthy Bible-based sermons to the collection of the weekly offering. In Babworth, Clifton recognized Robinson's gift as a biblical scholar and teacher, and made him assistant pastor when they consolidated the congregation in nearby Scrooby to avoid detection by the royal authorities. In 1609, after the Pilgrims were forced to flee England for Holland, Robinson succeeded the aging Clifton and became their minister. In the city of Leiden, under Robinson's care, the Pilgrims found their spiritual and congregational identity. Robinson and many in his flock lived in the shadow of one of Leiden's oldest churches, the Peterskirk. This building facing it was erected in 1683, long after the Pilgrims were gone. But prior to that stood the house where Robinson lived and his congregation worshipped.
Robinson respected Clifton's legacy. As pastor, he used the order of Sunday worship developed at Babworth and Scrooby. And like the older Reformed congregations in England and Amsterdam, the Leiden Church was gathered by covenant, with all members agreeing to walk commonly in the way of God and to submit to the guidance and discipline not only of the officers, but of the entire church body.
These were radical ideas in Robinson's time, a rejection of the Anglican Church's top-down centralized control in favor of self-governance. And in 1620, when the Pilgrims saw the need to begin again in America, it was Robinson who encouraged his flock to apply the democratic principles of their church to a stable, self-governing colony in the New World.
John Robinson remained in Leiden, ministering to church members too aged, weak, or frightened to be part of the congregation's vanguard in America. His intention to join the Pilgrims in Plymouth was thwarted by the company's poverty. In March 1625, around the age of 50 years old, he died still in Leiden and was buried here at Peterskirk.
Among the things the Pilgrims took with them to America was a letter of farewell written by Robinson. His words of advice would find their way into the historic document we all learn about in grade school, the Mayflower Compact.
Whereas you become a body politic, using amongst yourselves civil government, let your wisdom and godliness appear to promote the common good.
John Robinson, a pilgrim that never set foot in Massachusetts, planted the seed of government by the people and for the people, and profoundly influenced the course of American democracy.